The courtroom was silent, the only sound the faint creak of wooden benches and the distant echo of footsteps in the grand stone corridors. Tension thickened the air, as if the very walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the verdict that could change everything. At the center of it all stood Chu-jin, her eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding spirit. She was not just another defendant, she was a symbol of rebellion. She faced her accusers with a calm resolve, her expression serene, as if she had already accepted her fate. But beneath that calm, a storm of conviction raged. The judges, stern and unyielding in their ornate Qing dynasty robes, represented the full weight of the empire, an empire desperate to silence her rebellious voice and make an example of her. Chu-jin was charged with treason, her so-called crime, poetry that dared to challenge the status quo, words that called for women's freedom and the overthrow of tyranny. Her supporters, huddled in the gallery, whispered prayers and clung to hope. Meanwhile, her enemies, conservative officials and loyalists to the old order, watched with cold satisfaction, hoping for a swift and public execution to crush the growing movement. Yet, even in the face of mortal peril, Chu-jin's presence was commanding. She refused to recant, refused to betray her cause, her voice unwavering even as the threat of death loomed. In that charged courtroom, Chu-jin was not merely defending herself, she was defending the future of countless women, daring to imagine a world where their voices could finally be heard. In early 20th century China, the lives of women were shaped by centuries of Confucian doctrine. Confucianism, the dominant philosophy for over 2 millennia, dictated a rigid social hierarchy and prescribed strict roles for women, emphasizing obedience, chastity, and self-sacrifice. The 3 obediences and 4 virtues demanded that a woman obey her father before marriage, her husband after marriage, and her son in widowhood. These rules confined women to the domestic sphere, where their primary duties were to serve their families, manage the household, and bear sons. Education for girls was rare, and most were denied the chance to read or write. Instead, they learned skills like weaving, embroidery, and tea service, tasks that reinforced their subordinate status. Practices like foot binding further symbolized the physical and social limitations imposed on women. Public life was reserved for men. Women were expected to remain indoors, their voices and ambitions silenced. Arranged marriages were common, and many young brides entered unfamiliar homes, often with little say in their own futures. The patriarchal system was deeply entrenched, upheld by family elders, and reinforced by Confucian ancestral halls, where family rules and codes of conduct were displayed and strictly enforced. Yet, even within these constraints, some women found ways to resist. They whispered dreams of education, passed secret letters, and supported each other in quiet acts of defiance. Among them, Chu-jin emerged as a beacon of hope. Through her poetry and essays, she boldly challenged the very foundations of Confucian ideology, calling for women's liberation and equality. Her courage inspired others to question the status quo, sparking a movement that encouraged women to imagine a future free from tradition's shackles and to demand a place in the changing world. Born into privilege in 1875, Chu-jin grew up in a well-off family in Fujian province. Her father, a respected scholar, believed deeply in the power of learning and encouraged his children, daughters included, to pursue knowledge. From a young age, Chu-jin was surrounded by books and the lively discussions of her elders. She learned to read and write early on, mastering poetry, history, and the classics. Her passion for literature set her apart, and she often expressed her thoughts through poetry, even as a child. She was known for her sharp mind and independent spirit, questioning the limitations placed on women in her society. But at 21, she was forced into an arranged marriage that stifled her spirit. The expectations of a traditional wife clashed with her dreams of independence and learning. Despite feeling trapped, she continued to write, using poetry as an outlet for her dreams and frustrations. She also began to seek out new ideas, reading about reform and revolution in secret. Her quest for knowledge and freedom led her to Japan in 1904, where she enrolled in a progressive school for women. There, she was exposed to new philosophies, science, and the revolutionary movements sweeping Asia. In Japan, she found a community of like-minded thinkers, students, activists, and writers who inspired her to imagine a different future for China and for women. After years of study and activism abroad, she returned to China with renewed purpose, determined to fight for equality and justice. Her experiences, both the privileges and the hardships, transformed her into a formidable advocate for change, especially for women's rights and education. Qiu Jin's background, her family's values, and her struggles against tradition all laid the foundation for her revolutionary future, shaping her into a symbol of courage and hope for generations to come. Qiu Jin's poetry was a weapon, her verses bold declarations against injustice, but also intricate works shaped by the literary traditions she both revered and rebelled against. Drawing inspiration from classical poets like Li Qingzhao and Du Fu, Qiu Jin blended elegant forms with radical content, using familiar structures to deliver unfamiliar, revolutionary messages. Her most powerful poem, A River of Crimson, captured her revolutionary spirit and called for equality. But many of her works echoed with themes of sacrifice, exile, and the longing for freedom. The radical content of her poetry, critiques of foot binding, arranged marriage, and the subjugation of women, made her a target for authorities who feared her influence. Yet, despite the risks, she continued to write, undeterred by danger, using her pen to challenge not only political oppression, but also the deep-rooted patriarchy of her time. Her poetry gave voice to the voiceless, weaving together personal pain and collective hope, and inspired others to join her cause for women's liberation. With every line, she wielded her pen as a sword against oppression, transforming the literary tradition into a force for radical change. For Qiu Jin, poetry was far more than art. It was a weapon for revolution, a means to challenge the status quo and ignite change. She used her writing to mobilize others, awakening the consciousness of a nation. Her verses circulated in secret gatherings, passed hand to hand among women hungry for change. Her words critiqued societal norms, denouncing foot-binding and arranged marriages, and called women to rise up for freedom. In one poem she wrote, "Don't tell me women are not the stuff of heroes." Young women saw in her a role model who dared to defy convention. Her poetry emboldened her contemporaries, inspiring them to form study groups and secret societies. Her poetry became a catalyst for a movement to dismantle patriarchy, fueling protests and calls for reform. Through her verses, she gave voice to the silenced and hope to the oppressed. Qiu Jin's words outlived her, inspiring generations of feminists and activists. Her poetry remains a rallying cry, echoing through time as a testament to the power of language in the fight for justice. Qiu Jin's activism extended far beyond her poetry. She was a woman of action, determined to reshape society at its core. In Japan, Qiu Jin immersed herself in revolutionary circles, joining organizations like the Tongmenghui, a secret society dedicated to overthrowing the Qing dynasty. She studied political strategy, military tactics, and the art of mobilizing people for change. Upon returning to China, she boldly adopted male attire, a radical act that challenged gender norms and allowed her to move more freely in political spaces. Qiu Jin delivered impassioned speeches at rallies, urging women to break free from oppression and join the fight for equality. She founded the Chinese Women's Journal, using it as a platform to spread revolutionary ideas, advocate for women's education, and call for independence. Through her writing, she reached thousands, inspiring women to envision new possibilities for themselves. Qiu Jin established schools for women, where she secretly provided military and political training. These institutions became hubs for organizing resistance, and she personally mentored young women, preparing them to become leaders and revolutionaries. Her activism was not without risk. Qiu Jin operated under constant threat from authorities, as her involvement in revolutionary organizations and her outspoken advocacy for women's rights made her a target. Despite surveillance and the danger of arrest, she continued to organize, rallying support for the feminist movement and empowering future female leaders. Through her courage and relentless activism, Qiu Jin proved that women could be agents of change, not just subjects of tradition, risking everything to ignite a movement that would echo through generations. Qiu Jin's revolutionary activities soon drew the attention of the Qing authorities. As her writings and speeches inspired more followers, the government grew increasingly wary of her influence. In July 1907, during a sweeping crackdown on suspected revolutionaries, Chu Jin was seized at the school she led. Soldiers stormed the premises, searching for evidence of rebellion, pamphlets, weapons, and secret correspondence. Dragged before stern-faced officials, Chu Jin was subjected to relentless interrogation. The authorities demanded names of her fellow conspirators and pressed her to confess to plotting against the empire. Despite threats and intimidation, she sat upright and unflinching. Chu Jin refused to betray her comrades, answering their questions with silence or defiant words. Her resolve never wavered, even as the interrogators grew more aggressive. The officials, frustrated by her courage, realized that her ideas and spirit posed a grave threat to the established order. They pored over confiscated documents, searching for any sign of weakness. Chu Jin's unyielding stance in the face of danger became a powerful symbol of resistance. Her bravery inspired countless others to continue the struggle for freedom and equality, even as she faced the gravest consequences. On July 15, 1907, Chu Jin was led through the gates of the Shaoqing courthouse, her hands bound, her head held high despite the jeers and fearful silence of the crowd. She was executed by beheading, a brutal and public end to her fight for justice. The authorities intended her death as a warning, posting proclamations throughout the city and forcing the public to witness her execution. Many in the crowd were gripped by fear, but others wept openly, unable to hide their grief and admiration. For her supporters, the shock and sorrow of her death quickly turned to resolve. Her martyrdom galvanized activists, who gathered in secret to mourn and to vow that her sacrifice would not be in vain. The government tried to erase her legacy, banning her writings, censoring her name, and confiscating any trace of her poetry. Homes were searched, manuscripts destroyed, and even speaking her name became an act of defiance. Yet, her ideas could not be contained. Her poetry and revolutionary spirit continued to circulate underground, passed from hand to hand, whispered in secret gatherings, and cherished by those who refused to forget. Chu Jin's execution marked a turning point in the fight for women's rights in China. Her death sent shockwaves through the nation, awakening a new generation to the urgency of her cause. Her sacrifice became a rallying cry for future generations, inspiring countless women and men to continue the struggle for equality and justice. The memory of her courage lives on, undimmed by time or fear. Chu Jin's legacy endures as a symbol of courage and resilience, her memory honored at monuments and in the hearts of those who visit them. Her writings, filled with passion and defiance, continue to inspire those who challenge oppression and fight for women's rights, both in China and around the world. Generations of women have drawn strength from her story, finding in her example the courage to speak out and demand change, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Chu Jin's influence extends far beyond China's borders, inspiring feminists and activists worldwide to continue the struggle for equality and justice. Her courage in the face of persecution is a powerful reminder to stand up for what is right, no matter the personal cost. Her voice, once a threat to the empire, now echoes through history as a testament to conviction. Her legacy lighting the way for future generations to dream, to resist, and to create a more just world.